Hey guys, Hailey Lain, aka Key Black here with another episode of Off the Cuff, and I'm still not done with Yu-Gi-Oh! I mentioned before a couple times that I never actually finished reading or watching the series, and all this talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Lately, especially with the panel and everything, I figured I would try and reread the series from start all the way to finish, and I'm not gonna talk about every single chapter on the Off the Cuff series, but I thought it would be kind of fun to talk about what exactly I liked and what made the biggest impressions on me reading these chapters, like the first time I read them and reading them again now. I've said before that my experience reading them the first time was like I couldn't put them down. It's so much different from what I had seen in the anime when I was little. And if you haven't experienced the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga yourself, if you're familiar with the TV show, or maybe if you're just familiar with it through the card games, it's a different story entirely. So I'm gonna start with chapter 1. I'm gonna start with the chapter called The God Puzzle, which kicks off the entire mystery and intrigue of the series. The cover art has the other Yugi, or Dark Yugi, or Yami Yugi, you know, take your pick, inside profile in this very simple but really striking artwork. And already, he looks completely different from how he does in the anime. It's much more organic, it's much rounder, it's a lot cuter. That already had me going like, what am I in for here when I first started reading this? I still have a huge soft spot for this art style in the early Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga. Like, even looking back, like the first big color spread page you get is Yugi and Janochi and Anzu walking all together away from Domino High School, and the drawing style is really weird. It's cute, it's organic, it's kind of friendly, almost. Like, the anatomy's a little bit all over the place, but it doesn't matter. It's just like, it feels good to look at. On the first page, you get to meet Yugi, who is this kind of a wimp, wussy-looking kid who's playing pop-up pirate by himself in a corner in the classroom, and he declines the offer to go play basketball, and he's like, oh, well, you know, I just think I'd make my team lose. He's already a far cry from the Yugi that's in the anime, who's maybe not hyper-confident, but, you know, at least seems to know his stuff. This Yugi is practically inviting the bullying that he immediately gets from early manga Janochi and Honda, who look like completely different characters from how they look in the anime. You get the impression in the manga that, oh my gosh, these really are some petty high school kids, but they're written so well you can't help but just like them all. Then Anzu comes in, total boss here. She chases away the bullies with like a single word, and she's very different from her anime self too. And you know, as the chapter continues, you kind of start to get the impression of what Yugi's relationship is with his classmates, and what the situation is with him and his bullies, and who the real bully is. Ushio comes in, and you see his interactions with Janochi and Honda, and it's like, okay, already you know who's the real big bad in this situation. I also love Janochi like screaming after Ushio. Is like, oh, perfect. But you get this kind of nice back and forth between the high school drama stuff and this kind of building mystery about this weird box that Yugi has, this Millennium Puzzle as he calls it. I kind of glossed over it at first, but the first page of the manga is actually this depiction of an ancient Egyptian carving where two people are playing a game, and the inscription says something about the Shadow Games. And you don't really get any elaboration on that until you start seeing the focuses on the puzzle, and it's really, the pacing of the chapter changes. The paneling becomes a lot more slow and deliberate and creepy. You start getting this really eerie, bad feeling about the puzzle. You know, Janochi throws the piece into the water to try and just, you know, show Yugi a lesson, right? And you get this weird zoom in on the puzzle piece, and it's like, that's weird. Why is there a rumble sound effect? Something's with that piece. And then Sugoroku finally comes in. He's hilarious, and he all but confirms that, yes, this puzzle is cursed as hell. Everybody who's been involved with it has died in a horrible way. It's played off where Sugoroku just wants to sell it, right? But then you still keep getting those really creepy zoom-ins on the puzzle, like where Janochi throws it into the water and where Yugi falls asleep at his desk working on it. I love the paneling and the tone in those drawings. Again, it's more about like the feeling that you get from it than the anatomical, you know, correctness. But there's so much love put into each drawing, especially where the detail matters. When you get to later in the chapter where you find out exactly what breed of bully Ushio actually is, he's beating the crap out of Janochi and Honda, is extorting Yugi for money as payment for bodyguard services. Yugi's rightfully horrified, but we find out what Yugi's actually really made of, where he stands up to Ushio. He throws himself between him and the two people who had just been bullying him earlier. The expressions and the action and the pacing in the sequence are just gorgeous. You can see like the genuine shock and horror in Yugi's expression, you can see the condescension and amusement in Ushio's face, and then Jinochi, who can't believe what he's seeing, is just completely stunned. And of course, the really wonderful, weird angles to emphasize the height difference between midget Yu-Gi-Oh! And like super tall, towering Ushio. The pacing kind of gives you that sick-to-your-stomach feeling as you're reading through it. It's like, oh, this is not going to end well, but you know, you're rooting for the little guy. He's actually made of way sterner stuff than first impression would say. And you know, Yugi's been a total pushover this entire chapter. He even said earlier that he didn't really think what Jinochi and Honda did was actually bullying. It took a lot for him to finally say, no, what you're doing is wrong, stop it. And it's only after he finally gets that bit of like, damn you, Ushio, that he starts trying to put the puzzle together again and the pieces start fitting together. This whole sequence where he's finally putting together the puzzle it's completely riddled with sound effects, it's completely consuming the page, and it's creepy. It's like, oh, you're kind of excited with him, you want to see him complete the puzzle, but you're also getting this really weirdly bad feeling that, oh, it's kind of like he's getting sucked into his own little world here. You're starting to get excited to see it start to come together, and then it's broken up by Yugi's missing the last piece. Sugoroku comes in, he's found it. Oh, thank you so much, Grandpa. Grandpa reveals it wasn't him who found it, it was one of Yugi's classmates, and he reveals only to the audience that it was Jinochi, who has had a serious change of heart after seeing Yugi's got some freaking guts. And all of a sudden, that unsatisfied expression he was wearing earlier when he threw the puzzle piece into the water makes sense, and it's like, oh, good. I only noticed this while reading it this time, but Yugi only solves the puzzle after his attitude has switched back from damn you, Ushio, to wow, thank you so much, like this genuine wholesomeness. And so now, like, reading through it again, I'm kind of torn between thinking, oh yay, he's finally gonna get his wish, and that thing is really seriously cursed, and it only started activating after Yugi got resentful. Like, Yugi's giving out warm and fuzzies, but the puzzle sure isn't. You know, when I first read this, I was like, oh, I know what's in the puzzle, it's the pharaoh. It's gonna be, you know, Yugi turns into the pharaoh and turns into a badass and saves the day, and that's very, very different from what happens here. He slots in the last piece, some energy overtakes, and you see these three Wadjet eyes burst out of the puzzle, burn into Yugi's forehead, and then you don't see him for several panels. You see this kind of interesting shot of Ushio suddenly looking like the focus here. And you have the creepiest reappearance of the main character I've ever seen in anything with, I wanna play a little game, Ushio. He challenges Ushio to the game that we saw in the first page where people are stacking things on top of their hands and stabbing them with a knife. I still love the line that the other Yugi says when he challenges Ushio here. He's like, we only need one thing to play this game. That knife you've got hidden, Ushio. It's like, oh my god, this is such an abrupt change in tone. Again, the expressions and the art style here is just delicious. Yugi looks creepy as hell. The grin is really unnerving, like you kind of want to root for him because yeah, he's kind of dispensing justice, but this is really sadistic. They play through the game, and as it's going on, the intensity and the expressions are getting more and more extreme. I love this sequence here when Ushio realizes he can't relax his hand, and you get that creepy zoom in on his eye, and then he makes the decision to try and stab Yugi. You get these really dramatic panels, these crazy angles, and then finally the other Yugi administers the penalty game. And I love this 2-page spread where he's pointing at Ushio. You get these crazy speed lines of school in the background, this beam of something shooting out from his fingertips. I would hang this thing on my wall. Once again, the art style goes really freaking weird. You get this kind of unnatural, eerie sense of whatever's happening here is not real. That little game over panel is so playful, it's almost mocking. And then we get that stark contrast switch back to Yugi in high school, and everything's fine, and Yugi doesn't remember anything, and that's a little bit worrying, but he has this then really heartfelt heart-to-heart with Jinochi, who is finally kind of started to see, yeah, you know what, this kid I've been picking on is actually pretty cool. Again, I love the expressions on Jinochi. He's like that little panel where he goes like, ah, this is nothing, happens all the time, but by the way, Yugi, I also have a treasure, kind of like you did. You want to see it? It's cheesy, it's corny, but it's so sincere. It made me feel so good when I was reading it the first time, and it still does, you know? I'll get that little blossom of just warmth in my chest. The chapter ends on that lighthearted, sweet, a little bit silly note, and then you get a drawing of Yugi in the same pose as the other Yugi on the cover of the manga. And I just love that end cap. I love the back and forth between the two wildly different tones in this manga. The art style is so freaking weird, it glues it together, it feels both friendly and organic and also really, really creepy and off-putting at exactly the same time. I just freaking love it. Like, even going back and reading it now, I still get goosebumps reading through this chapter. But I've been talking for a while, so guys, thank you so much for listening and for watching. I'm gonna cap it off there, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks again.